today is from Japan. And given the time difference, he accommodated us and we are doing at this time. Normally we do anytime post lunch, but when we have people from California, we do it in the evening, sometimes 8 to 9. So this is in that context. We all know Indonesia is chasing a dream of golden Indonesia by 2045. India, 100 years of independence, is also nursing a dream of developed India 2047, which we call Viksit Bharat. This objective and goal has been given to us, but by none else than our Prime Minister, who has had vast experience as a Chief Minister of an important state and then Prime Minister of our country for more than a decade. We are at 2,880 USD today per capita. To get an entry, to be a developed country defined as one, we need to raise our per capita income to about 18,000 in the next 21 years. It is doable. There are challenges, but there are extremely encouraging good examples. Korea, China, of course, are there. How do we grow on this path? What are the type of challenges we will face? We were wondering at EGROW Foundation whom to invite. Japan is a great example where after the World War and the bombing, Japan grew to such high growth rate, it was almost overtaking America. Japan is a unique example. In 1900, this country was the only country which had a central bank, while other central banks were in Europe. Only central bank in Asia, Japan, Bank of Japan. Japan's growth trajectory, again, very impressive. Japan suffered numerous lost decades from 1970 onwards. What are the challenges that a country faces while becoming developed? We have invited, and we are so fortunate that Professor Kazuto Suzuki agreed to come and speak to us. Professor Suzuki is Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo, Japan, and Director of the Institute of Geoeconomics at International House of Japan. He has significantly contributed and significantly, in the real sense of the term, in various committees of the government in various capacities. We thought it will be best if he comes and talks to us about the experience of Japan, the rise in growth rate, and then what happened from 1970 onwards. To discuss and chair this session, very fortunate to have Dr. Nicolas with us, who is a global expert himself and serves as a senior advisor to the Dean and CEO at the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo. He is also a senior fellow at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries in New Delhi and co-founder and president of the Grand Paris Alliance for Metropolitan Development, where he works on urban policy, sustainable infrastructure investment, and global governance initiatives. He is extensively rich in the cooperation that is required in the global south. His experience, his thoughts, his initiatives are very encouraging. We requested him to chair the session, and we are fortunate at a very short notice, he agreed and he's with us. With this brief introduction of the chair and our key speaker, I hand over the session to the chair, Dr. Nicolas, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharan Singh. As I was kindly requested to join this session, especially with Professor Kazuto Suzuki, whom I do not know personally, but I know some of the work. How could I say no? So I said yes. And therefore, I must just correct one little thing. I have been for a couple of years advisor to the Dean and CEO of ADBI. Now I am a fellow of ADBI, but I was privileged over the last decade to work with three deans of ADBI, an economist, Professor Naoyuki Yoshino, and a development economist, Dean Tetsushi Sonobe, and now previous former Minister of Finance of Indonesia, Professor Bambang. And I would say that throughout the past decade especially, I have been personally learning a lot about a number of policy and economic policy aspects of Japan. The last element I would like to mention as we will be starting this webinar session today is that I am also now working, as Dr. Sharan Singh kindly mentioned, with RIS in Delhi, but also as a professor at Nalanda University in Bihar, where we just had a few days ago the launch of format of discussion called Nalanda Development Dialogue to address a number of issues of development cooperation in the future, in the very context of geopolitics and geoeconomics that we do know. And previously, back in December, there was a nice so-called Asian conference on rural development. And the Japanese demographist spent an hour explaining some aspects of convergence between Japan demographics evolution, especially since the aftermath of 1945, and India demographic trajectories, and some aspects of it were compelling. As for his conclusion, he was saying that somehow in Japan looks today what India could look in 50 years, and nobody really agreed because there are so many other factors than demography which are at play. And with this, I pass it on to you, Professor Kazuto Suzuki. Thank you so much for joining this session today. And I suppose that after your presentation, we will have time for some further Q&A and exchanges, and I will myself probably have one or two questions to ask you. Professor Suzuki, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shin and Dr. Buchoud. I am very delighted to be invited for the EGROW's webinar, and I am sorry for inconvenience of the time. It's I know it's a mid-afternoon in New Delhi, but well, I am currently in Tokyo. Well, not exactly Tokyo. I am in Kyushu because of my business trip. But yes, I am very honored and happy to have an opportunity to speak about Japan for the audience. So I was asked to talk about the growth experience of Japan, and the Dr. Shin has asked me to do the 1970s and onwards, but I think it is important to start with the immediate after the World War II. So let me just describe. So I can only speak in very general terms because I'm not the economist, and B, I'm not a historian. So what I'm going to talk about is, generally speaking, about the outline of the Japanese history, but I hope that it will give some sort of an essence of the secret of why Japan made a remarkable economic growth during in the last century. So the initial condition for Japan after the World War II was extremely confusing and complicated because Japan lost a war with the 2 atomic bombs, and Tokyo, Osaka, major metropolitan city were devastated by the air raid by the United States. So there were a very strong sort of a sentiment against the act of war, and also there were very strong feeling against the government. So the Japanese population, generally speaking, having a very strong skepticism about the role of the government. So in this way, there were very strong similarities or continuity of the popular sentiment of the free trade and the free economy, because the government intervention was considered to be bad, and the free market, free enterprises, and the animal spirits of the industrialist were considered to be a good thing. So there were a very strong encouragement of the entrepreneurship and a very strong sense of the idea of investment in venture activities. So, for example, the companies like Sony, Honda, Toyota, these are, of course, they existed before the World War II, but they were much more smaller companies, and because of the collapse of the Japanese traditional economic system, because of the war, there was a very fertile ground for the new entrepreneurial activities emerged from the ashes of the World War II. So that was basically the embryos of the Japanese growth in the 1970s. There were certain loss of confidence, so the Japanese government was very much less interventionist than before. But what was interesting was that there were a very strong consensus among the Japanese government and the public and the businesses to reestablish the Japanese strength through no military activities. So Japan took a pacifist concept and a pacifist constitution, and the idea is that Japan is the bad guy. So Japan is a
Yes, please, everyone who is joining this session, please be on mute. Otherwise, we will be annoyed by some background noise. Yes, please, everyone, please put your mic on mute. Dr. Rina Party, if you hear me, can please can you put your mic on mute? Otherwise, we'll have to put you out of the meeting.
Yeah, Radna, oh, he's very busy. He says, "Uski to already renew hui hai."
Dr. Party, if you hear me, please put your mic on mute. Thank you very much.
Red.
Sorry for Professor solving this inconvenience soon.
Okay, well, it seems fine for a moment. Are we? Well, anyway, I'll just go on.
Can you mute someone?
Telling the administrator.
Well, anyway,
So despite the AI and so on, we are in the real life of such meetings. So I think it is being solved. Please go on.
Okay. All right. So where was I? Okay. So Japan was basically, having this pacifist concept, which means that there is a concentration of the economic growth, both there is a consensus between Japanese government and the public to restart the nation building through the economy and spending less on the military. So the Constitution, Article 9 especially, is renouncing the engagement of the war, and Japan will only have the military capabilities for the self-defense. So this constitutional framework gives a lot of opportunities for the Japanese government to take leadership in the economy, and there is a concentration of resources. And also, what is interesting is that there was a shift of the engineers who worked in the military industry, the defense industry, during the World War II, has no place to go. So these engineers went into the automobile industry, aircraft industry. Well, aircraft industry was banned until 1952. They went to a shipbuilding, etc., etc. So Japan had an industrial capabilities with a lot of human resources, and especially the alliance with the United States allows, and of course the starting of the Cold War, including the Chinese establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949, created a very sharp situation of the Cold War in East Asia, especially the Korean Peninsula. 1950, from 1950 to 1953, there was a Korean War. So these security environment around Japan created a lot of very strong commitment by the United States to protect Japan and the Pacific Islands, so that Japan does not need to invest itself in a defense capabilities. Also, because of the end of World War II, there was a big baby boom and very strong demand for the reconstruction of the country. So there were a lot of investment in the constructions, the investment in infrastructure, and the government led reshuffling, because the Japan restarted from the scratch. So we were able to create the efficient industrial structure around the Pacific, what we call the Pacific Belt, from Tokyo to Osaka to Kyushu, where I am now. So that there is a concentration of the industrial capacities in the coastal lines, so that we'll be able to import the resources and export the products. So Japan focused on the manufacturing sector by processing and inputting a lot of technological capabilities, which are inherited from the World War II. And there are lots of SMEs. This is one of the secrets of the success of Japan. The quality of SMEs are so high, especially with the craftsmanships. The smaller companies, even today, for example, the Shin-Etsu Chemicals or Hamamatsu Photonics, probably you may never heard of the name, but it is dominating the share of the semiconductor products or the some electronic parts and components. So these very competitive SMEs were grown under these circumstances, and providing the high quality products to the competitive products such as car, electronics, etc. There are also another interesting aspect of Japan is the internal migrations. Most of the European countries, including the United States, depended on the migration from outside. So that is why the countries like Germany is struggling with the 3 million Turkish population or other migrations from other countries. This was partially of the lack of the lack of the human resources in their countries. In case of Japan, because of the baby boom after the World War II, there were a number of young generation. Sometimes it's 15, 16 years old, are coming to the metropolitan area or coastal um, industrial districts to work. So there were a concentration of the population in the major cities like Tokyo, Yokohama, Osaka, Nagoya, etc. And this was fulfilling the gap of the shortage of the workforce. Of course, as a result, there is a dissertation of the population in the rural area, and that is, of course, the undermining the Japanese agricultural capabilities. But again, because of the growth of the population and because of the lack of the cultivatable lands in Japan, the Japan at the end is giving up the self-sufficiency of the agriculture and shifting towards more manufacturing-oriented countries. So, and also the housing issue was very important in that regard, because of for accommodating the internal migration, the massive internal migration in the tens of millions are coming to the urban area. There were creation of the huge housings, the collective housings in the suburb of the major city. So currently, the Tokyo is hosting. I mean, the Greater Tokyo counts more than 25 million people living in the one city, and of course, from the Indian standards, this is not really a big city, but in comparison to cities like New York, which has 8 million, or the Los Angeles, with the greater Los Angeles has 15 million. So compared to that, Japanese housing system is very much concentrated in the major metropolitan areas, especially in Tokyo. That is creating a lot of demand for the public transportation. So again, Japan is currently working with India to build the high-speed train, and this was the sort of an outcome of this concentration of population in the Pacific area. So from Tokyo to Osaka, this is a Pacific belt, and this is where the bullet train, the high-speed train, are initially created in 1964. And also this concentration of human resources created a new urban culture. So, the Japanese competitive products such as J-pop, manga, anime, the character businesses such as Hello Kitty are created under these circumstances. So this created a lot of new potential for the non-manufacturing industry, which eventually becomes as one of the strengths of the Japanese economy. Japan suffered in the 1970s of the oil shock in 1973 and 1979, and there were certainly a stagflation. Japan is very much of the dependence, energy dependence of Japan is tremendous. 98% of oil comes from Middle East. So current closure of the Strait of Hormuz is now being a significant problem for Japan, and also Japan imports 100% of the natural gas. Mostly from Australia, Malaysia. So the Strait of Hormuz is not a big problem, but the cost of energy is being a big problem. Japan focused on the nuclear energy as an autonomous energy. Okay, so
so if possible, maybe you can off the or unmute the mic from there.
right, so the Japan has invested a lot on the nuclear energy, despite the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So what was very interesting is that the idea of introducing a nuclear energy was because it was a civilian technology. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the bad case of using the nuclear technology, but the Japanese politicians and the industrialists convinced the Japanese public that we can tame the this demonious technologies to something under the civilian control. So the civilian control of the nuclear technology was the major discourse that is used to accept the nuclear technology. And eventually, we had at the maximum point, we had 58 reactors in Japan, and probably you know that the 3 of which was devastatingly failed during the 2011 Great Eastern Earthquake in Japan, or probably better known as a Fukushima accident. The Fukushima Daiichi power plant were failed because of tsunami, and that was the major nuclear disaster in Japan. But after all, the energy needs is much dire in Japan. So 15 years after the Fukushima accident, we are currently running 12 reactors, and we are coming back to use the nuclear energy again because of the shortage of the supply, and especially for the decarbonization, and currently and most recently about the closure of Strait of Hormuz. So nuclear is still a very strong lifeline of the Japanese economy and the industry. There were, together with the nuclear, there were industrial pollution in 1970s, 60s, 70s was serious about the air pollutions, the water pollutions. There were Minamata disease, and these are hurting a lot of people. But incidentally, Japanese government took very strong actions to set up the environmental regulations, and currently the Japan is the most least polluted country in terms of the industrial waste. The Japan established some sort of a circular economy, which is to recycle the industrial waste and to invest in a lot of effort for the recycling. So that's the technological solution to the industrial pollution. There are questions about the diversity of supply, especially after the oil shock. The idea of importing oil from different places, but unfortunately, Japan has put a lot of efforts, for the natural gas. We try and find the diversification of the natural gas, but the are we okay? So we are putting a diversification of natural gas. So Australia, Malaysia is the major source of the Japanese gas, but unfortunately, oil, we still depend 80% of the oil coming from Persian Gulf. So the oil shock in 1970s has made very strong awareness of the economic security of today, but that is not yet achieved even after 50 years. The Japan, as well as other industrialized countries, including Europe and the United States, faced stagflation. But the Japan was the beneficiary of the oil shock and the stagflation because the Japanese cars were very much of the strong competitive because of the fuel efficiency. So there were increasing number of exports from Japan to United States, and automobile became as a core of the Japanese economy. So I think there were sort of an evolution of the Japanese economic, the core of Japanese economy from the textile in the 1950s, and then to heavy industry such as steel and ships in 1960s. And then after 1970s, the automobile became as the core of the Japanese economy. And this was largely due to this oil shock, which led to the trade friction with the United States. The United States were today, United States is targeting China, but in 1980s, the United States was targeting Japan as the enemy number one for damaging the U.S. economy. So the difference between today's U.S.-China rivalry, the Japan-U.S. relationship was also under the structure of the Japanese dependence on the security on the United States. So the Japan as an ally of United States still having a very strong dependence on the U.S. forces, and Japan has no choice but to accept the U.S. demand for restricting the export to United States. Then the Plaza Accord came in 1985. Because of the balance of trade was so unfavorable for United States, and Dr. Shin is an expert on this, so I'm not going to explain so much. But the eventual consequence of the Plaza Accord was that there were so strong, there was a very strong concerns about the strength of yen. After the Plaza Accord, Japanese yen became much stronger, so that the export to United States and elsewhere is going to be very problematic. So the strong yen will effectively slow down the Japanese economy. So there were very much concern among the Japanese government and government officials. So they took the low interest rate policy. So there were sort of a quantitative easing of the monetary supply, which led to the huge speculation on the land and real estate, and which creates the housing price and the price of land enormously high. So you can buy the entire United States only with the size of the metropolitan Tokyo. The price of the land of the metropolitan Tokyo was equal to the price of the entire U.S. continent. So that was that was very much of the bubble, and this bubble busted. So the end of bubble economy has created a lot of stress on Japan. the major banks and the securities have just collapsed. Most of many Japanese companies faced the shortage of the monetary supply, and there was a huge damage on the corporate structure. Traditionally, the Japanese economy was considered to be sort of a so-called the Japan Inc., the government and the industry working together to achieve the goal of the economic growth. But after the end of bubble economy, all the companies are taking a sort of the measures of survival. So there were more market-oriented, more competitive. There will be no more government protection, and this is coincided with the time of the establishment of WTO, more free trade. So Japan is exposed to the much more freer trade and the global market competition. So each company has taken some sort of a global strategy, which is to establish the global supply chain, which eventually means that most of the manufacturings are moving away from Japan, so-called hollowing out. And the hollowing out took place tremendously after 1990s. And currently, the Japanese manufacturings are very much manufacturing companies are moving to shift to the more software-oriented, service-oriented companies. So, for example, I am currently in a place called Kokura, Kyushu, which is the home of the Nippon Steel. And also there are many factories around major Japanese industry. And I visited one of the factory in NEC, the Japanese electric company. The NEC used to produce the computers, the semiconductor, the various electronic equipments, but they don't do nothing anymore. They no longer produce semiconductor, no longer produce personal computer or anything, but they are now focusing on the algorithm. So the NEC is very strong in the facial recognitions programs or the biometrics analytical softwares. So the Japanese economy is now shifting towards the much more stronger, the service-oriented businesses, and it eventually transform Japan from the manufacturing country to more software service-oriented companies. Nevertheless, these are the shift of the big companies, but again, the quality of small and medium-sized industries still remains. So they are providing the high-quality products to the global customers. So even Chinese industry requests Japanese parts and components. If you have an iPhone, if you open up the iPhone, the 30% of the iPhone product is iPhone components are made by the Japanese products. So this is where the quality of the SME still lies in Japan, and this remains as a strength. However, the bust of bubble economy created a loss of confidence. The Japanese businessman, Japanese entrepreneurial spirit has just gone. They do not take risks. They simply had an experience of risking too much, putting their assets into something which seems to be growing, but it was just a mirage. So Japanese industrialists became very risk evasive. Well, there are very strong risk evasive behavior. So after the bust of bubble, can Japan come back? Well, there are attempts to bring back Japan to the again very competitive in industry. The Abenomics during the Abe administration from the 2012, Japan started the quantitative easing, still, requested after, suffering from the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, etc. So Japan was suffering from that impact of the 2008 crisis. And the Abenomics continued the quantitative easing, which created the sort of lots of opportunities for investment, but it didn't happen. The government spending also created the lot of public goods and creating, maintaining and sustaining the employment and the economic level, but it didn't contribute to the growth, but it contributed to the increase of the public debt. The biggest problem of the Abenomics was that there was no structural reform, which is that Japan is still very much of the over-regulated, slower decision-making, and lack of innovation policies. So Abenomics were not being successful to achieve the goal to revitalize Japanese economy through the deregulations. The Japanese economy, as I said, are moving away from quantity to quality. The Japanese services are now improving, and the Japanese products are sophisticating because the total cost of the Japanese products are very high. So eventually, we need to be competitive in the quality because we cannot be competitive in the prices. The current Prime Minister Takaichi is launching the new initiative called the Growth Strategy. I happen to be a member of the Growth Strategy Council, which directly advises to the government. And one of the uniqueness of the Takaichi's growth strategy is that it's not just the economic growth. There are two pillars of investment. One is the growth investment, and the other is the crisis management investment. So we need to build the infrastructure in order to make Japanese economy resilient. So being autonomous from the Chinese economic coercion is one thing. Being autonomous of creating the industrial basis for the for basic stuff such as shipbuilding or port logistics, these are also very important to maintain the infrastructure. So the idea of this two-pillar strategy is that it is not aiming only of the economic growth, but also the growth of the national capabilities and the national capabilities of further growth and also being competitive. So this is what is happening in Japan, and I will stop here. I'd be happy to discuss with the audience. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. This is a very comprehensive overview of a number of critical factors of Japanese growth, ups and downs and ups, and resilience since the 1945. And I'm sure that among our dear and estimated colleagues in India, there would be a number of remarks, but also ways to compare factors that you have highlighted. I am thinking about just a few. That is the energy factor with the nuclear, the infrastructure factor, especially with the high-speed rail, the pollution and environment factor, which at the moment is also a very important issue in the Indian context, cities and beyond, the agriculture factor, and then in the second half of your presentation, we can see that things have become more and more complex as Japanese economics were intertwined with both first the kind of a commercial dispute with the US and also the entering into an era starting in the beginning of the 90s of globalization of trade and commerce. And probably why the discussion between Japan and India is so interesting and so fruitful is also because we are entering into now a different era, which is no longer just about globalization, but about the reorganization and repositioning of a number of economic, trade, and innovation factors. Professor Suzuki, while I was listening to you and also before maybe we open the floor for a few questions and remarks, and please use the chat box for that purpose. For continued and insightful discussions India, Japan, and Japan-India, there are a number of issues also pertaining to pre-1945, which might be less well explored by India, right? Which is both how early stage industrialization of Japan was being set up, especially after the Iwakura mission to Europe in the second half of 19th century. And I always remember this example of Japanese industrialists and government, including also financial authorities, looking at the case of Belgium, which is such a small country in terms of size, but back also, especially at that time, was a beacon of development, industrial development, innovation. And there were many questions from Japan about how it is possible. And I would like also to highlight another factor very briefly. That is how much Japan also, starting in the end of 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, has been consistently using the World Expo, starting with the Chicago World Fair, to expose a number of range of products. And Professor Suzuki, you mentioned how important are issues of creative economy and cultural aspects, but also role of MSMEs, right? Somehow, about a century ago, those factors were also very much present about how Japan affirmed its role on the international stage and echoed by the success of Osaka Expo of 1970, which was a beacon of the information and technology society in an earlier manner. I'm mentioning those factors because also, and this will be my last comment, in this very moment, and being neither Indian nor Japanese, say neutral observer of how much quality of economic discussion between India and Japan matter, both across Asia, both across what we call the free and open Indo-Pacific, but also as stabilizer across Asia and on the global stage, starting with what happened during the G20 of Japan itself, the G7 of Japan, but also the G20 of India, and the launch of such conclaves as Cotelia conferences and so on. I stop here for those comments, but if there are at this stage no specific questions, and maybe help me with the find on the chat, Professor Suzuki, I would just like to ask you one very, very simple question: is how would you see, I would say, highest potential of mutually enriching cooperation about future of economic development between Japan and India, in light of everything which you have described, and also the enduring Japan-India cooperation, which has been an important factor for both countries over the past decade and beyond? I think you are on mute, Professor Suzuki.
Sorry. Yeah, I think there are a lot of potential for between Japan and India. As a director of the Institute of Geoeconomics, we conduct the 100 company survey of Japanese companies on the economic security every year. And every year, the India comes as the first, either number one or number two destination for the investment, or they are thinking of the future potential investment destination. The success of the multi Suzuki was very much of the shining example of the cooperation between Japan and India. Although we all know that there were certain difficulties, but there are successful cases such as multi Suzuki or Daikin for the air conditioning. These are showing they were the trailblazers. They open up the road, and it makes other Japanese industry to see the potential and the possibility that they can do business in India. Currently, the India is very much focused on the semiconductor. And the state of Gujarat is very much of the focus of the semiconductor industry. The Japanese semiconductor industry manufacturing equipment makers such as Tokyo Electron is strongly connected to the Tata Electronics, which is a major, the semiconductor producer in India. So I think this is the next generation of the potential cooperation. And furthermore, again, the Tokyo Electron gives you a very clear image that, well, Tokyo Electron is not itself by as a small and medium-sized company, but again, it is the equipment manufacturing company. So it's not the final product producer. But again, the quality of the goods are giving the opportunities for the further complementarity of the industrial structure between Japan and India. So I think the best possible combination of the alliance between Japan and India is that Japan provides those parts, components, the manufacturing equipments, the machine tools, etc., to help the further industrial growth of India. And of course, Suzuki Motors is not the biggest motor company in Japan. There are Toyota, Honda, Nissan, but I think those number 4, number 5 companies have more opportunities in India, because this is where there is a potential growth and potentially creating the opportunities for those number 4, number 5 companies to grow. So I think it is there will be a very good complementarity between Japan and India, and I think there is a lot of opportunities. Furthermore, there is a very good relationship between Prime Minister Modi and the Japanese government, especially the Prime Minister Modi and the Prime Minister Abe was very close, and the Prime Minister Modi is still working very well with Prime Minister Takaichi. One of the major projects between Japan and India is the high-speed train from Mumbai to Ahmedabad. And this is going to be an extremely important, because Ahmedabad is close to the industrial cities, and it is creating more opportunities for Japanese investment coming to Gujarat. And I think it will be a very important project for the Japanese industry to participate in Indian economic growth. So There's a lot of things that is going on, and I have no doubt that Japan and India will have very much of the win-win relationship.
So since you are, and I'm also conscious of time and your time too, but since you were mentioning the importance of the high-speed rail connections, right, at the moment, which also pertain to the development of long-term economic corridors in India and so on, I cannot help think also about one question about land values, etc. But my comment would be about these questions of land values that I learned a lot from Dean Yoshino about spillover effects of infrastructure systems. Positive, especially positive effects of building infrastructure systems, especially such physical infrastructure system, and especially in the case of India, with very, very high potential of managing urban growth and creating systems, positive systems of land value creation, but also land value capture. So, and there are a lot of works that was produced in the past 20 years upon that topic only, that also echoes a number of other environmental and human development factors. The other element, Professor Suzuki, I wanted to highlight, since you mentioned innovation and new directions also from Japanese companies and government in the silicon context, or in the chips and microconductors industry. In Japan, and you are in Kyushu now, right? Silicon Kyushu was long well known as one very, very important place in the world for producing microconductors. And then suddenly it declined a little bit, and there were a lot of critiques about brainless Silicon Kyushu. And in the past years, this was very much reinstalled with this notion of new Silicon Island vision. So could you give us briefly one comment about this development of silicon industries, both in Japan, and how it could also be bridged with India? And then we would conclude with one aspect of, I would say, future thinking regarding values, education, and communities and family values. Floor is yours, Professor Suzuki. We have about 5 minutes left.
Right. So thank you very much for the question. Well, Silicon Kyushu is now reinstating because of the Japanese industrial policy is coming back. The semiconductor producer in Taiwan, TSMC, which is the largest producer, the foundry of the semiconductor industry, is looking for the alternative investment destination, and Japan offered the subsidies to support the establishing a factory in Kumamoto, one of the Kyushu city, and this is creating a lot of opportunities for the revitalizing the Silicon Kyushu. So the University of Kyushu and the other, industrial infrastructure, also the human resources in Kyushu are now concentrated in Kumamoto. And the first factory of TSMC is already in operation. The second factory is now under construction. This is the new potential for the Japanese semiconductor industry, which is to set up the stability of the supply chain in Japan. But also, Japan is aiming for more stronger international competitiveness, so that the Japan is now investing for the second factory of TSMC in Kumamoto, and also establish a company called the Rapidus. So Rapidus is also aiming for the 2-nanometer node semiconductor, and this is the highest quality, highest performing semiconductor at this moment, and they will be exported to the major semiconductor companies such as NVIDIA, Media Labs, etc., etc. With regard to the question that I have in the chat, the Japan reached a high economic value through family values, education, and innovation. I think the Japanese education and family values contributed a lot, But the point is that these family values and education were meant to build up the Japanese, the young peoples to be very honest and very hardworking workers in the factories. So these are the people who are working hard, very skillful, lots of craftsmanships, the loyalty to the company. Those are the major values of the investment um, in the um, uh, in the Japanese society. However, this is sort of this is not fit for the age of AI. This is not fit for the age of innovation, because people are working hard, people are doing everything they are told to do, but you need someone more creative, you need someone more aggressive, you need someone who is thinking out of the box. And this is not fit for the Japanese family values or education. So we need to do something to change the society. Well, of course, the Japanese society is evolving, the family values are changing, and I think we need to fit that values into the new circumstances. The other question I have is the land value in Tokyo and North America thing.
Maybe for this specific question, we would need another full seminar, right? About the
Yeah.
implication between such evolution and land values and various factors.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for today, dear attendants, we are reaching the end of this 1 hour conversation, and I know that Dr. Singh always wants that this sticks to the time, because this is also the format. But I would like to thank you, especially Professor Suzuki, because you kind of already my conclusions. My last question was about which directions could be privileged. I know that India is working towards this Viksit Bharat 2047 directions. And actually, your point about notions of creativity, evolution of the society, addressing such changes also echoes very much the time we are in. If I just take the titles of the Kotelia Conference, 2022, Redefining the Future, 23, Navigating a World on Fire, 24, India Era, 25, Seeking Prosperity in Turbulent Times. And I think this will be a feature of navigations of governments and companies and all international community also for a while. And for that, adaptability and dialogue and creativity and values are probably absolutely critical factors. So with this, I would like to close our seminar with warm thanks to Professor Suzuki, and of course, not without passing the baton and the mic to Charan Singh for a final word of appreciation and vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Professor Suzuki, I want to thank you for very elaborate, pointed, and I thought a very rigorous analysis of the complete narration covering a period of nearly after the Second World War, as you mentioned, covering a period of about 75 years. And I totally agree with you. My own gut feeling was that at that point of time, before the Louvre Accord and the Plaza Accord, Japan was #1 enemy of America, as you just put it. And hearing from you just affirms my fears that anybody who's trying to raise their head or grow faster or grow equivalent, there are challenges to face. China is facing it right now, and other countries could also in future. So I totally agree and appreciate your candid remarks and your analysis. I must also thank you, Nicolas, for readily agreeing at such a short notice, and the value addition that you have done to the discussion is massive. I'm so happy, Professor, you are going to be here at the Kotalia. We'll talk more about it when you are around.
Okay.
Just a housekeeping announcement. Next week and week after, March 20 and 27, we are talking about, and the time will be 4:30 to 5:30, we'll be talking about investment and infrastructure in our country, mainly from the chapter in economic survey, and we'll have somebody from the Ministry of Finance, their advisor, come and speak to us. And week after, we are going to discuss AI and India, a very prominently placed chapter in the recent economic survey of Government of India. And again, we'll have some advisor from the Ministry of Finance, Government of India, to come and talk to us about both these chapters. The timing will be the traditional EGROW webinar timing, 4 to 5:30 or 4:30 to 6. And I hope all of you can please join in those. Once again, I want to thank each one of you for making this webinar so rich with your comments in the chat box. And once again, thanks to you, Professor Suzuki and Nicolas, my friend, for being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.